on the Cambridge Ball State Cardinals Sports Network from Learfield. Welcome to This Week in Ball State Sports, a Ball State Athletics podcast, highlighting the Cardinals athletics teams and administration each week. Presented by Cambridge. Here's the voice of the Cardinals, your host, Mick Tidrow.
Hey, Cardinal fans, welcome back into This Week in Ball State Sports. Another episode here today. We have a lot of good content coming for you. It's homecoming. It's Bronze Stock rivalry matchup for Ball State football. And we'll have Roy Weaver also joining us, who is the author of the Timmy Brown book that came out recently, highlighting one of Ball State's best football players. It's also a celebration of 100 years of Ball State football, so really cool to peel back the story of Tim Brown and then also what he did after Ball State. And Roy was one of those co-authors. So Roy is an awesome conversation. Roy will also be around to talk about the book and be around for signings as well if you want to at the next 3 football games at home. So check out Roy Weaver and the Timmy Brown story through that, but great conversation coming up there. First up, though, Director of Athletics Jeff Mitchell, then after that, Head Coach Mike New of Ball State Football. Jeff, appreciate you joining us, and happy homecoming week. It's finally here, and the weather's going to be spectacular.
Thank you, Mick. Yeah, it's a great week. It's been beautiful thus far this week, and I keep looking at that forecast for this weekend, and it is going to be absolutely picture perfect for fall football.
End of October, couldn't ask for anything better. It's homecoming. It's Bronze Stock rivalry. We'll get to all that here in a second, Jeff. But one big initiative the Mid-American Conference has this week is MAC Mental Health Week, and Ball State had the opportunity to host Shaquem Griffin, former NFL player for the Seahawks, to speak to the student athletes. Just from that perspective and the week as a whole, what does that mean for you in this department?
Well, I think it's one of the priorities for us as we talk about championship performance and what goes into that culture. We're learning more and more about the benefits of mental health and what that means to our student athletes, what that means to our coaches and administrative staff, and how we view it. And to have somebody like Shaquem come in and talk about his journey of resilience and to pour into our student athletes that were present for the presentation to hear about the attitude of just keep showing up. That was basically the message, and it's so true. And sometimes, we can preach it all the time, but to have another individual, another voice who is not connected with us, but is instrumental in telling those stories of resilience. It's helpful to hear those messages from time to time, and so we're grateful for the opportunity to listen to Shaquem and to have him present to our student athletes and to tell us about that journey of resilience. It's a professional football player who is or has the opportunity to play with one arm and his hand not fully developed on one of his arms, and to rise to the level that he did is a remarkable testament to his resilience and overcoming the odds. And so that message, I think, resonates with our student athletes, and grateful, again, that he was with us. More broadly, I think some of the initiatives that we're taking within our department, led by Dr. Lindsey Blom, are so critical to how our student athletes perform during the games, how they perform academically, how they live their lives outside of the walls of the athletics department. And we're needing to place more emphasis on what that looks like, creating healthy habits, celebrating those habits when done well, and acknowledging that we have a lot of work to do in this space. And I credit Dr. Blom in the work that she's doing to help us be first in class in that space within the Mid-American Conference. Even more broadly, with the championship performance emphasis that we're placing there, looking ahead to 2030, and I realize that's a long way away.
It'll be here fast, though.
But it comes quickly. But we have to think that way as we build our Championship Performance Center, as we explore whether it's a staffing issue or program issues that we face in terms of building out this comprehensive mental health platform to better serve our student athletes and our coaches as well. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it's the right time to do it. And so we're pouring into those spaces, and our industry is changing, as we've talked about. So the confluence of the work that's being done right now is timely. It's a lot, but it's timely because everything is so interconnected, and we don't want to be punting this down the field and we'll get to it later. We've got to do it and address it now. But again, Mick, it's a lot, but we get to do it together and in a connected way because all the issues are intertwined.
You do say you can't punt it down until later, but you have to have the long-term vision and couple that with a short-term plan. And there's that balance of trying to do that all at the same time.
That's exactly right. So when I say we don't want to punt it, it's because we don't want to just kick the proverbial can down the road. Mm-hmm. We want to address it now. Certainly we have a long-term vision in place, but we've got to deal with issues that come to us right now, and that's whether it's mental health or other issues. We've got to address it. The beauty of it is, and Dr. Blum and I actually had this conversation over the weekend of how many issues are facing us right now. The beauty is that they're all connected. The challenge is there are a lot of them that are coming at us right now. So what we get to do as an executive team and as a leadership group within the department is address these things head on. And we're okay to fail. We're okay to make mistakes. We're okay to brainstorm. We're okay to ask these growth mindset questions about what if, why don't we, what's next? Mm-hmm. Those are very healthy questions to ask, and it's a great time to do it because we don't have a lot of clarity, and so we have to challenge ourselves to think creatively and to be better. And back to the topic of mental health, it's just one of the many challenges and opportunities that we have to make Ball State athletics better and Ball State University better. So we welcome it. But there's no shortage of work to be done.
Jeff, you used the word punting. Let's go down that road. It's homecoming for Ball State football. It's the Bronze Stock rivalry. Finally back at home for only the third home game after 2 more weeks on the road with Kent State and Vanderbilt. What are your homecoming week plans looking like as we record this on a Tuesday afternoon?
Well, it's a busy week. The university has so many activities. They had food trucks at the Brown Amphitheater last night.
I'm disappointed I didn't make it. I'm so sad.
It was an awesome event. I think we had close to 500 students that came to participate in it, music going, and that's fun. You've got the Air Jam coming up later this week. You've got a talent show is, as we record this episode, on Tuesday, I believe, is when the talent show is. And then, of course, the bed races on Friday. There's also a student experience. I'm not sure what the formal name of it is on Thursday. I think I said bed races on Thursday. I meant to say bed races on Friday. But this student experience is on Thursday afternoon. There was some thought that the director of athletics was going to be in a water tank or a dunk tank.
And?
Well, I think that's been scrapped, and not by me.
I'm rolling my eyes. Yeah. Since we're not on video, I'm rolling my eyes because I know that he says it wasn't him, but I think Jeff probably sidestepped this.
But I think there's now going to be some type of pie in the face experience.
Even better.
Which I'm not sure that's better. I think the dunk tank may have been better, but I've been invited to participate, and I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing that I've been invited to participate in that.
Kind of sounds like an honor.
Let's go with that.
So you'll get a pie in the face. Are you picking up a bed races team? I'm going to keep bugging you every year until you do it.
I don't think that I am. I don't know that I have done a good job, Mick, of expressing the proper enthusiasm either to participate as a driver or passenger on the bed, or as a runner, right, pushing the bed.
So you need somebody just to sign you up. So you need somebody just to do it.
From what I understand, though, I think sign-ups are complete.
This year.
Yeah.
This year they are.
Yeah. Now, do we have an athletics representative in the bed races, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I don't think we do. So I think that needs to be addressed for next year. And we can be better?
Well, I will evaluate the competition this year at the bed races. That is a can't-miss event, so I will be there, and we'll be cheering for the fastest bed.
I also know who signs your checks and can talk to that person and see if we can get them to have some influence on it. I bet we could get you a last-minute slot this year.
Something tells me that you will have that conversation with that individual.
May have already happened, but Jeff Mitchell joining us here on This Week in Ball State Sports. Jeff, it's big week for Ball State football. Close game against Vanderbilt, 10-point loss. Feels like there's a lot of momentum, though, from a quality game from the football team to try and bring that home, keep the bronze stock in Muncie, and pick up a homecoming win, get the season on the rails.
I'm really proud of our football team for the way they competed against Vanderbilt in Nashville over the weekend. There was a level of confidence that I haven't seen our team play with in several weeks, and so I was encouraged by that. I do think that will carry over. Certainly hopeful that it will carry over to Saturday against a very good Northern Illinois team. But it's homecoming. The weather's going to be awesome. The energy in the stadium is going to be great. Our crowd's going to be amazing. And so we're really looking forward to homecoming. It's a hard place to play when you have a homecoming crowd. Not only that, though, it's a trophy game, as you referenced. And so the Bronze Stalk Trophy, which may not be the most aesthetically pleasing trophy anywhere, is certainly a point of pride, though, because it resides on the Ball State campus, and we have no intentions of letting that thing leave Muncie on Saturday.
Back-to-back games with rivalry games. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but Bronze Stalk this week, and then on election night against Miami, Redbird rivalry. So 2 home games in a row, 2 rivalry games, 2 trophy games. Jeff, switching gears real fast to Ball State basketball. Preseason poll just came out. Preseason Player of the Year teams came out as well. Women's basketball, preseason favorite to win the Mid-American Conference this year. Allie Becky, preseason first team. Maddie Bischoff, preseason second team. That team's poised for another great season with the core 4, plus the additions they made this year, and then players rising up from last year as well.
It's always great to receive preseason recognition, and I think both of our programs will acknowledge that. At the same time, preseason recognition means nothing, and both programs would tell you that too. Mm-hmm. So I think the mentality of our men's and women's basketball programs is we're going to go out and be the best version of our respective teams as we can be, and go out and try to dominate as much as we can. I'm especially proud of where our programs are right now as we head into the beginning of the regular season. They've had great off seasons. Our coaches have been working diligently with our student athletes. And, as we record this now, Mick, I just returned from watching a little bit of men's basketball practice and look forward to seeing a little bit of women's basketball practice later. And I can't wait for our fans to see our teams compete. And I think they're in a position to be fun to watch. And they're going to be fueled by being as good as they can be as a team on any given night. And, we're just under 2 weeks away now from tipping the season off. And the women will be at home, the men on the road in the MAC Sunbelt Challenge. So it's coming, man. And I hope you're ready.
I'm ready. I'm excited. Let's do this.
Let's do this.
Jeff, before we let you go here, is there anything else you want to share with Ball State fans?
The biggest thing that I have to share is that I'm excited to see everybody on Saturday at Schumann Stadium as we celebrate homecoming, and to watch our football team compete. And then, yes, as we're getting close to basketball season, looking forward to seeing our fans at Worthen Arena. If you haven't gotten your tickets, please get those and come and show your support. It means the world to our student athletes. The atmosphere is enhanced the more fans we have in the building. And I really do think the 2 programs that you're going to see from a basketball standpoint are going to make you proud, and they're going to be easy to cheer for. And that's, to me, is really important, and just so encouraged by what I'm seeing on the floor right now, and happy for our student athletes and excited for them as we get this basketball season started. So looking forward to seeing our fans too.
Like Jeff said, haven't got your tickets, go ahead and check out ballstatesports.com or any social media channels. Also can call 888-BSU-TICKET. Women's team tips off November 4th in the MAC Sunbelt Challenge at home. Men are on the road with their first home game November 8th in Worthen Arena. Jeff, really appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Mick, thank you. Go Cards.
Fly, Cardinals, fly.
Jumps toward the end zone, barrels in, and he is in.
Every play, every touchdown, every Cardinal win is here.
Breaks a second. Malcolm Gillies off to the races.
We fly with the Cardinals all season long. The Cardinals host Northern Illinois. Join us Saturday, October 26th. Our coverage begins at 2:30.
Hey, Cardinal fans, welcome back inside This Week in Ball State Sports with head coach Mike New of Ball State Football. Coach, we'll get to, Vanderbilt and all that stuff coming up here in a few minutes, but appreciate your time first and foremost on a Monday afternoon.
It's good to be here.
Mike, it's MAC Mental Health Week, and Ball State was able to work with Shaquem Griffin, former NFL player, to come through and speak to the student athletes here at Ball State. What does that mean for the mental health side of things and the football program and all these athletes?
Yeah, first of all, I'm very appreciative that I had the opportunity to listen to Shaquem speak. There was a great number of football players in attendance as well as other athletes, and I'm just thankful I had an opportunity to hear him share his story. And, the biggest message is that, pain is temporary. He's been through a lot of adversity in his life and his childhood, and having his hand amputated when he was 4. And, I heard probably a big chunk of his life what he was unable to accomplish, and he chose not to let that define what his story was going to be. So a great message to our team in attendance coming off of, the Vanderbilt game the other night, and really just a great message in life that pain is temporary, and it's what you choose to do with it that will determine what the rest of your life looks like. So thankful that, Ball State and, had that opportunity available to certainly our football student athletes, but to everybody as well, and definitely a great message.
How did you see the athletes in attendance respond to his message?
I think you could have heard a pin drop. We're fortunate to hear him speak for roughly 45 minutes, and just a phenomenal story. I got to believe that there's a movie there one day coming, certainly a book coming, but just a very, very impactful message to anybody, not just student athletes, but to anybody that would listen, because we all have adversity in life. You have adversity in sports, but you have adversity, in your family, all those things. You have it on a day-to-day basis, and so I think it's just a great message on what he has had to overcome, and to be able to pass that on, because there's always somebody out there that has it tougher than you do, and so you always got to keep that in perspective. And again, I'm just grateful that I had the opportunity to be there as well, to listen to his message that I know for myself personally will draw on for years to come.
It's a great reminder for all of us, right? Even in your position, in your shoes, taking some of those messages to then be able to help the next generation of football players.
No question about it. Anytime that there's an opportunity like that, certainly taking advantage of that, and to being able to apply it to perhaps things that you're going through in life, whether it's football, whether it's off the football field. But again, just very appreciative of being able to listen to Shaquem share his story.
Mike, coming off the Vanderbilt game, 24-14 final there, tied 14 after 3 quarters. Just first and foremost, how did you see the team fight and compete?
Yeah, obviously always disappointed when you lose a football game, but when you're trying to be positive in terms of what took place, I couldn't be more proud of our football team for the fight that was on display for 4 quarters, and the physicality that was on display for 4 quarters. I think we proved to ourselves, certainly everybody that was there in that locker room at halftime, certainly everybody was there post game in that locker room. I think we proved to ourselves when we play our best brand of football and the way we're capable of, we can compete and feel strongly that we can compete with anybody. And again, focusing on things that were really positive the other night, just the start of the game, both offensively and defensively. The start of the second half, offensively and defensively, man, that's how you wanted to start it, and that's how you want to start the second half coming out of the locker room. And so I'm really proud of our guys for that. In the fourth quarter, it was just a game of inches here or there, and who knows, we could have put ourselves in a position to have a great moment there in Nashville.
That first drive was clinical by your offense. Almost 7 minutes off the clock, put 7 points on the board, quickly just stunned the crowd and stunned Vanderbilt's defense. What worked on that first drive to allow that to happen?
I think just trying to do a great job of keeping them off balance with some of the things that we were doing, whether it was the RPO game, in the run game. Obviously, we knew that was important for us, but I think as much as anything else, the execution by our players. Guys did a great job of being locked in during the opener meeting. The day before, did a great job of being locked in during the walkthrough that you go out. And I think every one of the guys believed, obviously our plan, it worked out. Vanderbilt won the toss and deferred. If we had won the coin toss, we were going to take the football because of the style of play and possessions being at a premium. We talked a lot about that, so we knew there was a pretty good chance that we were going to have the ball to start the game and for our guys to go out there, all 11 guys. And obviously with the substitutions, more than that, guys going out there doing their job one play at a time, executing and believing that we were going to go get that done was awesome. And a lot of guys were involved. It wasn't just one, so it was great to see that capped by Kyle Kelly's touchdown run there. We did a great job hitting the seam and finishing with that thing in the end zone.
You're right. There were so many different players that you can point to on that drive specifically that made an impact. Every offensive lineman, every position player that was in. And you mentioned it, the Kyle Kelly touchdown run to cap it off. When you are able to use Kyle in those kind of situations, how do you see that pay off? Because you haven't used him all drive, but then you can put him in to go for an 8-9 yard touchdown run.
Yeah, no, obviously we want to try to use them as much as we can. Certain portion of the game plan every week is some of the Kyle touches, whether it be through the run game, passing game, or anywhere in between there. But obviously getting down in there, and we know what a weapon he is and how tough he is as a runner. And so, credit him, but also credit the guys up front. The offensive line did a great job of setting the tone because we knew, we talked about it was going to be a street fight, and we knew we had to be physical with them. They were extremely physical on tape with Alabama. They were extremely physical on tape with Kentucky, so we knew we had to go right at them. And being physical and having that street fight mentality was important. I thought our guys did a great job of getting that established with that first drive of the game.
How are you seeing the offensive line evolve a little bit? There's been some injuries, there's been some rotations, but how are you seeing it evolve?
I just think that group of guys is a bunch of warriors, man. When you get to this point in the season, that was game number 7. Nobody feels great. Your body's beat up. When you play in the trenches, man, you're getting something, whether it's a direct blow or somebody catching you from behind or downfield or something. And so those guys are warriors, man. As much as they're banged up and beat up, I know whatever it takes to be able to get their body as healthy as they can by Saturday, those guys are committed to doing that. And again, fortunate to have that group up front. They believe in themselves. They play a lot of football, and Coach Johnson always has that group ready to go.
Chris Hood's had an opportunity to start the last couple of weeks. He was inserted against James Madison, but how have you seen him start to pick up his role and thrive?
Well, naturally, as you play more snaps, you get better, and you can see Chris starting to settle in now. Obviously, the speed of the game was probably the first surprise when you get your first most significant action, but now he's settled in. He's working on it. Obviously, he does so many things well, and he's continuing to work on things that he needs to get better at. And obviously, that comes from meeting room time with Coach Johnson. That comes from technique time during the individual stuff. But you can see Chris getting better and better with each rep, and his confidence continuing to grow, and he knows that he belongs out there, and it's good to see him starting to settle in that way.
Head Coach Mike New joining us on This Week in Ball State Sports, recapping Vandy, talking about Northern Illinois and homecoming coming up here in a few minutes. But Mike, just to wrap up the conversation on the Vanderbilt matchup, when you walked away and you've had a chance now for a couple of days to just digest what happened, what do you feel going into this week that makes this team ready to go and can put this season where it needs to be?
I mean, obviously, I'm also proud, I think, from the beginning to the end, the effort of our defensive football team from the beginning to the end of that game the other night was our most complete performance that we had. Was it perfect? No. But when during the course of the game, when something happens, you have a little bit of adversity, none of our guys ever blinked defensively. They just kept battling back. And one of the biggest bright spots, if you will, the other night, defensively is holding them to 3 field goal attempts. They got down into the red zone, and then we were forcing them to go backwards because we were doing a good job playing good team defense, and our guys really did a good job that way. I think that helped generate some confidence as well, knowing that, it was going to be a great challenge the other night, but also our guys see too, man. when we play the way we're capable of there defensively, we can play and really put good film out there. And so I think that's a positive, coming out of the other night. Again, there are no moral victories, but there's certainly some things that you could point to, say, man, that's awesome for that to take place and to be able to show up on tape. Because, listen, we're turning it into a 5-game season right now. We come back home after being on the road for 2 weeks there, and to be able to say, hey, man, we got a 5-game season. It's MAC play from here on out, man. We got to make sure that we're committed, we're buying in. As a message that Shaquem Griffin shared too, that I'm buying in, man, and everybody in our team and our program has got to be committed to that, and we got to be by each other's side and sell out, man, and make sure we do everything in our power, to play our best football for each other and make sure that love shows up day in, day out in the building and on the field on Saturdays.
Mike, you mentioned it, finally back at home. Last 5-game stretch, 3 home games. It's a little different than what the first 7 games of the year were, but it's also homecoming week. Northern Illinois is in town. It's rivalry. It's a home game after being on the road for a couple weeks, and you get homecoming. That's a lot to process. But for you, when you look at Northern Illinois on tape, what do you see? Yeah,
listen, Coach Hammock does a great job. First of all, this team is physical. They're hard-nosed. They play great defense. They're going to run the football. They always have 2 running backs that are heavily involved in their rushing attack. The quarterback's always involved in some capacity in the rushing attack as well. They've had their share of injuries, just like every team's had their share of injuries, but they will be ready to play. They had a dogfight with Toledo last weekend. That was a 1-possession game. This team's going to come in here. They're going to be hungry. Obviously, aside from everything else, it's a rivalry game. The Bronze Stalk Trophy is at stake. Yes, for us, we're coming back home after being on the road. Yes, it's homecoming. So, obviously, there's a lot of former players. If you are going to circle your calendar and say, man, I'm going back for one game, most of the time it's that homecoming game that you circle where you have a chance to see, the majority of the guys that either you played with or, that's the weekend that guys have a tendency to come back. So it's all about our preparation and focus this week, having a great week of practice here. It's going to be a street fight. It's going to be a physical football game. Northern's shown that on tape. I've had some huge wins, obviously none bigger than the Notre Dame one, but obviously it's conference now. And so, it's a dog fight, and that's the mentality that we got to prepare ourselves with this whole week of practice.
Hey, Mike, appreciate you joining us here on the show. Thank you, and good luck this week.
All right, thank you.
Fly, Cardinals, fly.
Jumps toward the end zone, barrels in, and he is in.
Every play, every touchdown, every Cardinal win is here.
Breaks a second. Now come Gillies off to the races.
We fly with the Cardinals all season long. The Cardinals host Northern Illinois. Join us Saturday, October 26th. Our coverage begins at 2:30.
Hey, Ball State fans, welcome back inside This Week in Ball State Sports. Another fun episode as we roll on here with Week 9 of Season 2. And we're pleased today to be joined by Roy Weaver, who's a Ball State alum, also former Dean of the Teachers College and author. Really appreciate you joining us, Roy.
It's great to be here.
So, Roy, you cover a lot of ground, A, at Ball State, and B, in the rest of your life. Just for the audience to get to know who Roy Weaver is, who is Roy Weaver?
Okay, I have lived all my life in Indiana except for 6 years. And so when I graduated from high school, I came to Ball State and finished a bachelor's degree here, finished a master's degree here, left and went to IU to get a doctorate. And my first job in higher education was the University of Southern California. I lived in Los Angeles for 5 years. And then I came back here. I thought, just kind of temporarily, but I ended up staying here forever. So I'm still here.
And what's it been like for you to be here in this area for this long?
Well, it's been interesting. One is that I live close to campus, and the campus is such a beautiful one, and always was, that it's kind of like having a large park next door. And I do a lot of walking on campus. I think it's one of the most beautiful campuses here. And I'm also excited to still be able to follow sports and have fond memories of buildings I used to walk through during the hard winters so I could still stay warm. So there are a lot of fond memories. It would really be hard for me to live anyplace else, I think.
You mentioned the word sports. We'll get to Timmy Brown coming up here in a few moments, just because you were the author of Timmy Brown's story, Roy. But you mentioned being around campus as a dean. I'm kind of curious about that. As the dean of the Teachers College, what was that like? It
was a wonderful experience. I had a lot of latitude as dean. We did a lot of interesting things. We had a wonderful program with different museums and agencies. Like we work with Baseball Hall of Fame. We work with the NASA. We work with national parks on what were called electronic field trips. For about 13 years, we had broadcasts around the world to elementary, middle school, and high school students. That was one project. Of course, I was here at the beginning of the Indiana Academy for Science, Mathematics, and Humanities, and had a chance to be a part of its development, and more recently worked with President Mearns and others on the relationship with the Muncie Community Schools. So I had a lot of interesting opportunities. I was blessed, though, to always be surrounded with people who were creative, risk takers, dreamers, and I just couldn't have done all the things that were done without them. I've always said that they were responsible and owned, for the most part, all the good things that happened.
You used a word that we often use here in the Creative Suite, which is where we're recording this podcast, Roy. You said creative. How did you use your creative juices to be the dean of the Teachers College and then also become an author about Timmy Brown in Ball State football?
Well, I think that was more time management than being creative. It took 14 years to write the book. And I was fortunate to have two co-authors, both of whom have had ties with Ball State. One, David Sullivan, graduated in landscape architecture, actually, but he was interested in journalism. And so he ended up being a copy editor for the Philadelphia Inquirer for 30 years. Another one is a person who still works here. He works in the Teachers College. His name is Sean Shriver.
Were you the dean when he was there, or
Yes.
is it a different time?
Yeah, I was there and hired Sean. But he was in charge of accreditation, certification, assessment, and those kinds of things. But in the same way that David, because of his copy editing experience, was able to bring his wordsmithing to the book so that it sounds like one person wrote it as opposed to three people writing it. Yeah. What was interesting about Sean, as a hobby, I discovered soon after I started working on the book that he was a historian of movies, music. He knew everything. It was amazing. It's one of those savants they talk about who suddenly you discover know everything there is to know about. So when you see anything written about Tim Brown and music in the book, a lot of that research, a lot of that work was Tim's. David came on board at a time it was we were struggling because we had tons of information. And for example, my wife and I had gone to visit the Philadelphia Inquirer for about 4 days one summer, back when newspapers still had libraries. And we were given open access to everything there. And so we copied everything we get our hands on there. We did the same thing in Green Bay. Tim was recruited his first year at Green Bay. It was Lombardi's first year there. And so we went up there to look at the library materials there too. But we had mounds of data, and we'd really written up to his football career. And it was like this giant mountain. How are we going to scale this thing? And it was, as you were alluding to, it's on top of a full-time job. Yeah. It's not something you just do as a hobby. And I talked to David and discovered that he was just getting ready to retire. And at the very beginning, we had invited David to be a co-author, but he said, I'm being copy editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and later it was not only the Inquirer, but it was another newspaper, so he even had more work to do, and he just couldn't do it. But then when he retired, I said, well, now you're retired. I said, we're struggling. I don't think we can get this done. And so I got a hold of him, and he said, well, send me what you have. And so I put in a big box, just mounds of paper and records and statistics and newspaper articles, and shipped it to him. And about 6 weeks later, he had a rough draft of all the chapters on football done. It was incredible. But the book never would have happened without the devotion of those two people and the good fortune I had in discovering them. So that kind of leads up to getting the book done.
Roy Weaver joining us here on This Week in Ball State Sports. An intriguing story Roy has about his backstory and is one of the co-authors of the Tim Brown story, Ball State football alum. Roy, there's a lot to unpack with what you just said. I love that story, handing it off to somebody that can get it back in 6 weeks and have a draft on the football pages, and having so much help within this. But Roy, when you talk about what was the drive to tell Tim's story, like what jumped out about him that said, I need to be a part of this?
Yeah. Couple of things. One of the things I did as the Dean of Teachers College, as all deans do, is they meet with alumni around the country. And back in February of 2008, I had a reception in Palm Springs, California, and we would always get a list of who's going to be invited. And I looked at the list and I saw the name Tim Brown. And when I was a sophomore here, I remember watching Tim Brown in 1966 become the first player in NFL history to run 2 kickoffs back for a touchdown in the same game. No one had ever done it until he did. I remember seeing him do that. And I wondered, is that the same guy? And so I called, and it was. And so he came to the reception, and what struck me, because he was quite a celebrity too. A lot of people think of him as a great athlete, but NFL Films and ESPN once put out a documentary called Renaissance Men of the NFL, and Timmy Brown was one of them. And that's because he was a model for Janssen Swimwear. He was a Botany 500 model. He recorded 6 single records. He was in about 14 movies, including MASH the movie and MASH the TV series. He was only one of 2 actors in both. He was also, probably the most famous movie he was in was called Nashville. He was also in all kinds of sitcoms, Mary Tyler Moore, Wild Wild West, and so forth. And so he was viewed as this person who not only was a tremendous athlete, but he was an incredible actor, singer, movie star, et cetera. So
it's almost what didn't Timmy Brown do?
Yeah, in a way. He was also a sportscaster, a color commentator for one year. And he also spent the last 10 years of his life working in L.A. County Probation Office. 5 of those years he worked with youth gangs. The remaining 5 years he worked with adult offenders on probation. So that was kind of the. But when he showed up at the event, now first of all, even till his last days, he looked like he could still pick up a football and play it. He was always in great shape. And he came to the event, and he was also always very well dressed, not ostentatious at all. But he was also a very mild-mannered kind of person, kind of quiet kind of person. And he was not the celebrity braggadocio kind of flaunting who I am kind of person. He walked around, I noticed, and he was very kind and polite. He'd walk around, walk up to somebody and say, hey, I'm Tim Brown. I was born in Richmond, and I went to Ball State from the Soldiers and Sailors Home. When were you in school? That kind of conversation, nothing. About 40 minutes later, though, I started seeing people congregate around him. And I walked over and wondered what was going on. And they were talking to him about his life. And he started telling stories like he had dated Dionne Warwick and Diana Ross. In fact, he and Dionne Warwick almost married. He was good friends. He was the best man for Chubby Checkers. Gene Kilroy, who was Muhammad Ali's business manager, was an operations manager for the Eagles in the 60s when Timmy went there. And he and Gene Kilroy were longtime friends. In fact, Gene Kilroy once said that if Timmy Brown doesn't get into the NFL Hall of Fame, they should tear it down and replace it with a 7-Eleven. But anyway, those are but so he had this connection with so many other people as well. But when he was there, I just noticed that it was the story. So afterwards I said, hey, Tim, has anyone approached you about writing a book about your life?" And he said, "No, no one has." I said, "How about me?" And that's how we got started. It became a long-time friendship for many years.
How did you cultivate that relationship to make sure that he trusted you with the information that you wanted to tell the story on?
Well, he used to laugh that we both were Gemini, and he thought that was cool. So he said, "We have a connection. We understand each other." So that was a part of it. But he was just a fun-loving guy and fun to be around. And I would spend, and my wife would often go with me, spend 2 or 3 times every year for about 8 or 9 years, and actually go to Palm Springs and sit with him for a week or two interviewing. And so I have tons of interviews, and they're taped. He came back to campus twice. He came back once in the fall of 2008, and we went down and visited Richmond together. We visited all the schools that he went to in Richmond, and then went to the Soldiers and Sailors Home, and went around Muncie and places here. And then he came back again in 2010. In fact, in a game against Western Michigan University, that he was out in the center of the field for the coin toss. And so he came back to campus twice, and he always really loved the campus and thought it did so much for him. But so we became very good friends.
Roy Weaver joining us here on This Week in Ball State Sports, talking Tim Brown. Roy, when you look at the story itself, you mentioned some of the accomplishments, but what else jumps out to you about Timmy Brown's story?
He was one of the most caring, polite people I've ever met. And you just, until you got to know him, it was interesting. He never, in my recollection, was a person who was mean-spirited at all. Now he could get upset, okay, and he did at times. For example, when he was the Soldiers and Sailors Home, and I remember that he was an outstanding basketball player as well. In fact, his senior year, he was the leading scorer in basketball for the county. But there was a game in which he was scheduled to play, and someone saw him talking to a white cheerleader. And he was confronted by an administrator saying, "It was reported you were messing with a white girl." And he said, "What's messing with a white girl?" And he said, "Well, you were seen talking to her." And he said, "Well, so what's wrong with talking to a girl?" And he said, "Well, you were messing with her." And he said, "What's messing mean?" And his coach came to him later and said, "Look," he said, "you're going to have to apologize, because if you don't, I'm going to have to bench you the next 2 games." And he said, "Well, I don't understand." He said, "I was talking to her because she was breaking up with her boyfriend but didn't want to, and I told him that I would try to help get them back together. That's why I was talking to her." He said, "Well, it's reported you were messing with her." And again, he said, "Well, what do you mean when you say he's messing? But just, come on, Tim, why don't you just admit it, and so you can play?" He says, "I'm not going to do that." He always stood his ground when he knew that he was right, but he faced racism through his entire life, and he was never afraid to confront it. He was not mean-spirited, but those were tough times. I remember too that when he was at the Home, there was a time when the team was going to stop at a restaurant on an away game, and they wouldn't allow the black players to come into the restaurant. And so, of course, they went to a different place. He had that happen through his lifetime several times, but he was never afraid to stand up. It happened in Green Bay, for example. He had dinner with a white family one time, and Lombardi eventually had to call a team meeting because there were players on the team that were being critical of him behind his back, and Lombardi called the team together and said, "Look, there's not going to be any racism here, And if you can't deal with that, you could leave now. You just directly dealt with it. But there was some fun there, too, because one of the things that was really interesting, one of my favorite stories there is, you know how they always have rookies do something and they make fun of them and razz them? Well, what they did there, when Tim was there, was they would say to a player to come up in front in the dining hall that one night when they did this and sing a song. Well, little did they know that Tim had been singing for a long time. And so they thought, you know, this rookie'd get up there. And so Tim went up front and he said, "What would you like me to sing?" And they just laughed because some others had sang and they were horrible. They said, "Oh, you just sing anything." And so he sang Elvis Presley's "My Teddy Bear." And he just, you know, just really did a great job, and dead silence. They booed him, but he loved it. So he it's just another interesting story, I guess. So where else were we headed here? I've lost my train of thought. There's so many stories I could tell.
No, these are all great stories, Roy. I appreciate you sharing that insight about him facing racism and adversity and things that he had to go through. And those are anecdotes I don't think that can be talked about enough, especially with a player of who he was. Roy, you were big and instrumental just trying to push for him to, you know, continue to grow and be recognized by places in the NFL. What was that process like for you to help make sure that Timmy Brown got his recognition that he deserved?
Well, it's mysterious in some ways. Promoting the book is difficult. It's challenging, given that he played so long ago. Mm-hmm. He's kind of a forgotten generation in a way. Now, the NFL has a group called Seniors Group. So, like, there's a class of 2025, and he didn't think that he would ever be considered. And the reason was that he got a coach, Joe Kuharich, with the Eagles, who did not like Timmy. He didn't like Timmy because he didn't like players who were kind of outstanding in their own right. He wanted a team player, and so their first meeting didn't go well. And it's also interesting, in 62 and 63, Tim was the all yardage running back best performer, and then if you look at his career once Kuharich started, he didn't get the ball as much. And so his performance deteriorated over time because he just didn't get to play. But he was, Kuharich and Pete Rozelle, who was head of the NFL Hall of Fame and the NFL, were very good friends, had been long-time friends. And so Tim, in an interview, said that he was once told by Rozelle that he would never get in to the Hall of Fame. So he believed that he'd been blackballed, that he would never even be considered. And so a year ago, we submitted a couple of faculty here, Gerald Cassidy and Holmes Finch in educational psychology, who are statisticians, helped me put together a nomination for the NFL Hall of Fame. But when I say it's kind of mysterious, all you do is you send a nomination to the Hall of Fame. It gives you an address to send it to. But unlike most awards that I'm used to, you get criteria. You say, you know, you can submit X number of pages, you need to include this, include that, and there's nothing like that. And so I assume that a person could say, I could have written, I nominate Timmy Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles, period. Send it in. Now, the other thing is that having been a dean and being a bit suspicious about making sure that if you have something important you want to get to somebody, you get a return certificate or something that says they received it. So I did that, and so I do know that a year ago they received it, but I didn't hear anything else. You know, again, usually when in education when we look at awards, and usually you get feedback from the organization that says, we're sorry to inform you that so, or you usually get a letter that says, hey, thank you for the nomination, we appreciate it, we'll get back to you. Didn't hear a word, didn't see anything any places. So I thought, well, we'll try it again this year. We did. And again, I didn't hear anything, but I got the certified notification that they got my nomination. And then just a few weeks ago, I don't know, I every once in a while, I just kind of play around with social media and plug in something, and I typed in Senior Class 2025 NFL Hall of Fame, and boom, a piece came up from the director of social media for the Eagles. And the title was 13 Eagles being considered for the NFL Seniors Class of 2025. And I opened, and boom, there's a little paragraph about Tim Brown. I thought, whoa. So I got a hold of the guy, and I had sent him a book about Timmy Brown some time ago. And in fact, he sent me a photo showing him with the book. And then I recalled that I had, but he was happy to hear from me. And but what that meant as I looked at it was that there were 181 players being considered. For example, there were 25 running backs. Tim was one of 25 running backs. And so they whittled the 181 down to 60 recently. Tim is not a part of the 60, but that's an incredible, range to be able to. So, but what I did do with last year with Gerald and Holmes, what they did was they looked at Timmy's performance in comparison to some other players at his position who were inducted into the Football Hall of Fame. And what they did, they looked strictly at performance, not what somebody thought about him, not what kind of influence some organization might have had. And again, that's something it's hard to know, what really goes on in making those decisions. Those of us from the outside, kind of wonder, well, if the president of the Dallas Cowboys wanted a former Dallas player in, do they have any more influence than Holmes Finch, Joe Cassidy, or Roy Weaver from Ball State? And you wonder. But the good news is that Tim was wrong. He has been considered, right? And so now what we're doing now is Gerald and Holmes, in looking at former players who are already in the Hall of Fame in comparison to Tim, we're going to do the same. They're going to do the same kind of study, looking at the 7 running backs who are still being considered now, because when they looked at I think there were 9 others looking back during the time that he played. He falls about in the upper middle of that pack. So they make the argument, at least from statistical point of view, he should be in the Hall of Fame already. And so we're also going to look at the other piece too. So we're hoping to get that information out so people have a chance to look at that. But in the end, we're happy that he's at least getting that kind of recognition. Discovered a while back that he had never been nominated for the Indiana Football Hall of Fame, and he's going to be inducted on November 10th. For that, it's going to be at a Philadelphia Eagles watch party bar in Indianapolis. It's called Hoagies and Hops, and it's timed to be on the same day that the Eagles play the Cowboys. Okay, and so that game's at 4:25, and about 3 o'clock we're going to have this little ceremony for him. But what's interesting about that, and it's another aside that I think is important, I mentioned to you the game in which he ran 2 kickoffs back for touch. That was against the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys were heavily favored to win. They played at Franklin Field, and the Eagles won 24-23. And it was Tim's 2 kickoffs that made a difference. The next year they played in Dallas, and Tim had heard a lot of rumors that they were going to get even with him. And so going into the game, he was kind of wondering about that and worried about it. And so I think it was about someplace into the third quarter that he was going out on a decoy route. You know what that is. You're not really the intended receiver. You might get thrown the ball, but it's pretty unlikely you're not intended to be. And so he ran out and then nonchalantly turned around when the play was ending. And Big Leroy Jordan, a defensive lineman, took his elbow and hit him in the jaw, knocked out 6 teeth, gave him a concussion, and he had broken his jaw and blood coming out. And the other Eagles players at the time were ready to go to war with them. But the rivalry and hatred between the Eagles and the Cowboys is attributed to that event. When the Cowboys tried to get even. To this day, there are Eagles fans and there are articles written about that. And so that's kind of an interesting tie-in to Tim Brown to think that that rivalry began because of the way they treated him in that game. So,
Roy Weaver joining us on This Week in Ball State Sports. Roy, we've gone over so much with your life, your career, and Tim Brown's story as well. Is there anything else before we let you go that you'd like to share about his story as we celebrate Ball State's 100th year?
I think just a couple of quick things. One is that we were going to stop the book after he finished playing football. And then he passed away, and we thought there was still some more story to be told. And so what we decided to do that we'd struggled with was, for example, when I was meeting with him once, we would sit and go through what had been drafts of. He liked to read the stuff, and I did too. So we would sit there, and I would read some, he would read some. And the rule was, if there's something we talked about last time we put in here that you don't think is correct, let's fix it. Or even take it out if you don't think it belongs. Or if, on the other hand, there's something you think about we haven't included, should be, let me know. And my wife, Marilyn, who was a journalism department chair here for a long time, too, and has all her degrees from Ball State. I only have 2 of my degrees from Ball State, was with me. And we were at a place called Elmer's having breakfast with Tim. I could still visualize it right now. And I was reading the chapter that begins is coming to Ball State. And I started reading, and he interrupted me, and he said, I didn't go to Ball State. And he liked to tease, joke with me. And I said, oh, come on, Tim, we don't have time for this. And he got serious. No, I didn't. I said, come on, man. I know you're jiving. It's not true. And he got serious and stared at me. And before that, I said, your brother John went to Butler. You came to Ball State. And he said, no, I went to Butler. And I just stopped the conversation. We changed the conversation to where are we going to dinner tonight. But this is the last time I ever could talk to him, because not long after that, I was able, along with a friend, to get him to see a neurologist. And that was the beginning of noticing that he had developed dementia, and Alzheimer's and eventually Parkinson's. And so there was a point at which I just couldn't see him anymore. So, I mean, I think it's important for people to know that has touched the lives of a lot of people. It's a tough sport, and there was a period of time when, in fact, there was a book written about the NFL called something about League of Denial. A couple of professors at UCLA did first big studies on it, and so I saw that firsthand happen to Tim. Tim, well, the example in the Dallas game is one, but he had a worse hit in San Francisco one time where 3 or 4 days he didn't know where he was. So dementia had struck, and so but in light of all that, one of the things that he was happiest about was that his son Sean, his only child, and Sean's partner Jennifer had 2 young children, and he first of all never thought that. See, he married when he was 50. He married Lee Hartley, who was a jazz singer, who was white and 17 years younger than he was. And they were married for 8 years and they divorced. But Sean eventually had 2 children, Leo and Ella. And that was something that really gave him a great joy at the end of his life, because he never really thought, first of all, he'd ever be a father, but to have 2 beautiful little grandchildren. So there is a really nice ending to the story if you, in the context of ending your life with dementia and Parkinson's. He had the interesting thing about him is he never complained about anything that happened in his life. I mean, for example, he was in the first 5 episodes or 6 episodes of MASH, the TV series, and had an agent who convinced him he should go into movies instead of that. He said, TV's nothing. Can you imagine the residuals he would have gotten if he'd stayed with MASH, one of the largest running, most lucrative, and he had a knack for the year that he was doing sports commentary was how Don Devine and Howard Cosell. And again, he was asked to continue on. He didn't. Some people say that if you wanted to summarize his life, he accomplished a lot of things, but he always fell a little bit short of what he could have done maybe, or what he thought he could have done. But he never dwelled on that. He never was, angry about that at all. He just was always a person who was largely satisfied with what he had done and who he'd become. Just a wonderful human being.
Well, Roy, that's a perfect way to sum up Timmy Brown's story, and we really appreciate you telling his story through written form and here on the podcast on This Week in Ball State Sports. Thank you so much, Roy. We appreciate it.
I got to give the book a plug.
Yes, exactly. How can we find the book?
Okay, it's available at the bookstore here on campus. It's also available online at almost any bookstore, and it's called Running Against the Grain, the story of Philadelphia Eagle and movie star Timmy Brown. Probably, Stan Parrish, once the head coach of Ball State, called him in 2010 the most outstanding football player in Ball State history. So I hope people run out for holidays and birthdays and celebrate another great Ball State player.
Thanks for listening to This Week in Ball State Sports, presented by Gainbridge. The preceding has been a Learfield presentation on the Gainbridge Ball State Cardinals Sports Network.